G'day guys. This is just a quick video on a question that was asked from me by Sean McLean. I'll just share my screen for a sec. So Sean basically, sort of asking questions. A lot of people have been asking, a bit of, he thinks he may have misunderstood the question. He's talking about he's unpastured omega-6 PUFA from animals, fat like lard bad, and I've sort of explained, no, it's not. He's talking about, but using the logic from species appropriate diet for humans, shouldn't that apply to animals too? So it's the old sort of thing that a lot of naturopaths and a lot of low carbers talk about, that basically the fats, what the animals are eating, that should affect us and all that. To some extent, but not really. We need to sort of differentiate. See, we're not basically eating, there's no connection between our gut and their gut, so to speak. We need to make that differentiation. So first of all, an animal like pork in particular is, as I pointed out, I said, I did say to him, if he's got evidence to the contrary that I'm wrong, please provide it. I always, as I said, I always ask my subs to challenge me, and and he's challenging me, which is a good thing. It's sort of created the need for this video, but that's fine, because other people may have a similar sort of thinking, saying, oh, is this really right? And I've actually said pigs are monogastric omnivores. They were fed grains and other mixed macro scraps, even in antiquity. Our modern health issues are due to what we eat than what pigs eat. And that's very important. In one respect, a grain-fed cow is probably worse than a pig. And I will explain why. Because a grain-fed cow probably has less detoxification capacity to deal with that. That's another reason why most grain-fed cows are not grain-fed for a long time. They're grain-fed for a very short amount of time after they come off a pasture for a couple of months, and then basically they fatten them up and then they slaughter them, because otherwise they get very sick. And in order to avoid them getting very sick, they slaughter them pretty fast. Pig, on the other hand, has no problems, can eat this sort of shit, can live in its own shit. It basically is even more capable than us at detoxifying. So it is a super detoxifier. So it has no real issues with a lot of things like grains and stuff like that. It doesn't even affect it. Pigs are very robust animals. They'll eat anything. Throw them anything, they'll eat it. And humans have been doing that for thousands of years. Have been throwing them anything there, and pigs will eat anything in sight. It doesn't matter what it is. They'll eat and eat and eat anything. They'll even eat their own kind. They'll eat anything. Biggest problem with all issues is the glyphosate and its effects on the gut. And I've explained that before, how it's a well-known patented antibiotic. So Monsanto took out a patent years ago for glyphosate as an antibiotic. And that's the problem. Excessive glyphosate will cause a lot of gut problems in a lot of people. Now, the small amount, because obviously if you feed grains to an animal, you'll get small amounts in its tissue. Very small. Compared to grains, it's minuscule. Our bodies can cope with that sort of amount. It's not excessive. It's not optimal. No, I wouldn't claim it's optimal, but it's very small. Obviously, in America, it's a bigger problem than other parts of the world, where it's not used, or, so there are issues about places are going to be different, one part of the world compared to another. North America is probably a bigger problem because there's far more use of it, extensive. So that, it depends. It's a lot of things. It's nuanced. But as I said, omega-6s are and these are the important things. I just really want to nail this. The omega-6s are irrelevant from animal sources. Omega-6s don't cause inflammation. Are we clear about that? They don't cause inflammation. But get converted to molecules like prostaglandins to respond to inflammation. Understood? That means they get converted. but only in an inflammatory environment. They don't get converted if there's no inflammation around. It's basically, a reparative mechanism, no different than how an LDL is used to basically repair endothelial dysfunction. Like Lp(a). Lp(a) is a hero. It's not a bad thing, even though it's demonized. It's like basically demonizing the fireman for turning up to put out a fire. That's what Lp(a) does in the endothelial cells. Omega-6s as prostaglandins do the same thing, converting to prostaglandin and other molecules that deal with inflammation. They're heroes. They are not. Arachidonic acid is a hero. Okay, let's make that quite clear. Like the fireman, as Lp(a) is a hero. And quite clearly by eating species inappropriate foods. That's what causes inflammation, like seed oils and refined carbs. So don't blame the fireman, Lp(a), or arachidonic acid for basically turning up to fix up the problems that you caused by eating inappropriately. Take fucking responsibility for your seed oil and refined carbohydrate consumption, because they are causing the inflammation, and then these things turn up. If you believe in crackpots, that basically the fireman is at fault for causing the fire, well, that's why crackpots like the Ray Peat people take, they take aspirin. And you know what? It basically doesn't fix the problem. All it does is blockade, and actually means that you have less. That means you have an acute problem. You should allow the body to deal with it, by heating up the area and getting more nutrients in there, by basically getting more of the actual systems that actually repair and heal and all that. That's what it's supposed to do. By slowing it down, by taking aspirin, or basically, or basically trying to inhibit these changes, or these by taking some sort of, dangerous contraindicated substance that tries to block that sort of thing, all you're doing is basically you'll end up taking longer to heal. That's what most people do. They take a whole lot of these substances and they heal slower, rather than allowing the body to heal itself as it's always done. If you want less damage for the body to heal, stop eating this shit that's causing the damage. It's simple as that. It's not complicated. Don't blame arachidonic acid for you inflaming the body. Don't blame Lp(a) for being upregulated as a protective mechanism because you decided to eat shit. That's what's actually causing it. We've got the thing the wrong way around. We're blaming the wrong person. We're not taking responsibility, and we're blaming the wrong person. We're blaming mechanisms that are there to basically deal with inflammation, and mechanisms that are there to deal with damage. They are there. They have been upregulated. They've turned up to do a job. A policeman turns up because there's a criminal around. If the criminal isn't there, obviously there's no need for the police officer to turn up with a gun. Okay? There's a reason why. Now, if you basically go rogue, or in nutritional terms, you basically put a gun to your head with toxic seed oils and all that, policeman's going to turn up to try and stop you, to deal with your illegal behavior against your own body. That's what's happening. Get it? That's the logic that you should be applying, Sean, and many others. That is the logic. These things are not causing the problem. They are part of the solution, but they don't need to be activated. You actually create the conditions for them to be activated. In a non-chronic way, it may not be a problem. You may injure yourself or whatever. But if you're chronically eating this sort of crap, you'll have chronic disease and chronic inflammation because you're eating this crap continuously. That's what most people do. And that is why these inflammatory things are upregulated. They are part of trying to deal with what you're causing. So let's get it right. We've got these things back to front, which is the biggest problem. Now, and I said this is going to be a short thing, but I've just realized it's going to be much longer. We're looking at basically things like in the UK, this is an old study, talks about how omega-6s went up from 10 grams to about 15 grams daily between the 70s and 90s, 50% up. And they talk about the requirement, this alpha linoleic acid, which is ALA, which is basically the plant-based omega-3. And they say the approximate, these sort of requirements that they talk about. And they talk about, the lowering amount of DHA in basically, breast milk and stuff like that, and the rising concentration of, linoleic acid. Well, that's happening because we're eating, seed oils. That's basically it, refined shit and seed oils. And it's not the increased use of cereals in livestock, because basically the percentage of the PUFA is no bigger. It's just slightly different. Let's just go into this. I mean, we've seen the differences. We're talking about, half the amount, but we're not talking about massive amounts. And the requirements aren't that high, only if you're inflamed. So all these high levels that they're talking about is always about inflammation, So, these are the sort of the omega-6 fatty acids. And they talk about 1.6 grams and 1.1 for women. And these are adequate intakes. And if you see, remember here, they've put the 2 stars. This is what they're talking about, guys. ALA, in terms of ALA, the plant-based, plant oils that contain ALA. That's what they're talking about. That's where these RDIs are coming from. They're not coming from animal foods. They're coming. There's no way you can get these quantities from animal foods. They're just not that high, and it's not a good thing. They consume very high. We know a number of populations that consume very high omega-3s have higher stroke rates. So and also poor clotting, and a more and easier to bleed and higher bleed rates. So it's not a good thing. So this is just nonsense. And as you can see, most foods, if you take a look at most foods, are very low. Unless you eat, even yellowfin tuna doesn't have a lot. All these, look at all these foods, very low. It's impossible to get those sort of rates on most of these foods. The only things you can are these foods, basically. This canola stuff is bullshit, because I'll show you shortly, the conversion rates are piss poor. So really, and the flaxseed is shit as well, poor conversion rates. And we'll go into it shortly about the conversion rates, because that's the conversion rates of ALA. The use of ALA labeled with radioisotopes, they've radioactively isotopes, so they know exactly where it's going. The stuff that goes in, where it's going, they can measure it precisely, which is very important. So just with background diet of high in saturated fats, conversion of long-chain metabolites, approximately 6% for EPA, 3.8% for DHA. With a dietary rich in omega-6 PUFA, obviously the seed oils is reduced. That can be reduced, the conversion that is, by 40 to 50%. So when we talk about 50%, we're talking about down to 3% EPA, and basically, what is it, 1.5 for 1.9% of DHA if you're eating a lot of seed oils. Okay, so you can see quite quickly that all this stuff. If the RDIs were so precise, people should be falling apart in left, right, and centre. They're not. Okay, so they're overestimated. That's because of basically for a lot of factors. That's why naturopaths have no idea. And excessive, like 5 grams or more of, fish oil or stuff like that, has actually shown in a lot of studies to be really detrimental. Even 3 grams is really detrimental. I don't think it's excessive. You don't need as much. Anyway, let's get back to this. And they talk about all this sort of stuff. So we know what the conversion rates are. Let's say, for argument's sake, that the conversion rates are really good. That means we're not guzzling down the sort of levels. Let me just go to, we're not guzzling down the levels of seed oils, and we're just basically using a lot of plants and stuff like that, not eating fish. So 3.8 divided by 100 and times what they call the 1.6 grams, which basically means you need 61 milligrams. So that conversion of 1.6, that's for males, would be 61 milligrams, okay, of basically DHA, okay? So let's look at beef. That's 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounces. And that is basically hamburger type. So it's got more fat. Obviously, it's going to have slightly more. So this is total omega is 40. And let's do the other calculation, which was, so we'll take that. And we'll also do the 6 divided by 100, which is the EPA as well. And because remember, it has to be, we're talking about half and half. So we'll total that. So times, and we'll average it because that's EPA DHA conversion. So 1.6, so it's about that. So 96, so 96 plus 61 divided by 2, we're talking about 78.5. That means combined EPA DHA, okay? Because that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about these sort of levels to make sense to us. So how much would you need to consume in terms of to get the good levels? So divide that by, let me just copy that, divide that by 40, times that by 100. That is nearly 200 grams. Divide that by 28.3. So that's about 7 ounces. Most carnivores will get more than that. Okay, so your essential fatty acids in terms of omega, EPA and DHA by eating animal foods is covered. Is completely covered and more than covered. If you're concerned, when we look at one single egg has as much as a burger nearly. So one egg. So if you basically, having 4 eggs, you get 39 times times 4, and plus, let's say you have something like 300 grams, which is divided that by 28.3. So we're looking at about 10.6 ounces. So basically, so 3 times the 40 plus what I calculate, 157, was it? 157, I think it was. So about 300. And that's there. And remember, that's what they call the bare minimum. So one steak and a couple of eggs has got you there. You can actually throw a bit of fish in if you want to in your week, and you'll be more than covered. A couple of fish. The Maasai don't, and they don't have to. I'll explain shortly why they don't have to. Okay, so beef has got that amount, as you know, and when we're looking at, not there, where is it? This one. So this is between like a grass-fed animal and a non-grass-fed animal, as an example. As you can see, a steak mince is about more or less 30, because the other one, remember, is mince, which is much higher because it's got the fat in it. So if you're just having a steak, and they usually trim fats off and all that, you can see the levels that are in terms of milligrams, it drops a bit. And it's about, you know, what is it? That's 29. It's about 8 milligrams difference between a grass-fed and a non-grass-fed. It's not massive. Let's not over-exaggerate that. Okay. So that's when we're looking at, you know, those sort of ruminants. Okay. So let's move beyond the ruminants. Eggs. We know, we've covered that. Now, milk. That's 1 glass of milk. 1 glass of milk. That's 244. 2 glasses of milk like the Maasai consume per day, or sometimes a bit more, would give you real animal, not the ALA, the plant-based, but the real animal stuff, 180 plus 183. And that's not even, you know, that's 366. You can see how we're getting, how we don't have an issue. Just 2 glasses of milk, or a big, that's what I usually have, 1 single glass of milk of 16-ounce glass, which basically, you know, I get just from the milk, let alone from the eggs and steak and all that, you know, in that regard. So there you go. And with the 366, because everybody's concerned, we don't have to do the conversion, guys. You don't have to worry. We're not doing conversions. Only the plant-based people are doing conversions, not us. We don't need to supplement. We don't need to do anything. We're getting it from the animal. Like, people in the past never got it. They got it from the animals. And because they were less inflamed, because I was on a species-appropriate diet, they need less as well. So the bare minimum is the bare minimum, and that's for basically people who are on an inflammatory diet. We probably need even less. Okay? Let me just make this quite clear, you know, because everybody's worried about, oh, I'm not getting enough conversion. Get it fucking out of your head. You don't need as much, you know. Well, everybody basically bitches and moans about my lovely pork. Let's check out pork. I bet it's really low, miserably low. God, you can't have pork. You won't get enough omega-3s. You'll be deficient. Really? This is USDA data. There you go. 100 grams of bacon. Yes, bacon, my dears, bacon. 189 milligrams. Ground beef, which has got more fat in it compared to a standard. I'm actually going for the ground beef. If you go for the others, remember, we looked at the actual, these meats. Look how low they are. Okay, kiddies, they're much lower in the steaks compared to, you get more in basically the hamburgers. Why do you get more? Because they've got more fat, the hamburger. Eggs as well, got more fat. That's 50 Let's take it to 100 just to illustrate the point, because we're all 3.5 ounces is 100 for every single one of these. Go to 100, 78, much, same amount of compared to even a burger, 78, far more, So compared to ground, 78 divided by, we'll go 40, that's 95% more, nearly double. Okay. And, and when we're looking at basically, let's go for the equivalent, which is 100 for the milk, to be fair, to the same level and all that. 75, very close, slightly below the eggs, but you can actually drink liquid milk much easier, let's be honest, compared to eggs of the similar quantity, But yeah, it's not too far from eggs. But look at pork. When we go for bacon, my dears, bacon, cured bacon, cooked, pan-fried, my dears. Yes, 189. Shits all over everything else. So do you think you're going to be deficient on a bacon diet? I bet not. In terms of omega, and remember, just because it's got more omega-6s, who gives a shit? You're not converting. Get it through your thick skulls. You are not converting. It's not ALA. This stuff here is EPA. It's from an animal. Animals don't have plant-based omega. This is basically an animal. It's got EPA and DHA. Okay, like the fish, like the beef, and like the eggs. This is animal-based omegas primarily. That's what we're talking about. So you don't need to do any conversion. No conversion required, my dears. So who gives a shit how much omega? Let the omega-6 pathway be very efficient. It doesn't basically, it's not being interfered by ALA because you've got nothing in there. So there's no competition and one is not retarding the other. This is why, the reason why on a plant-based diet, your ALA, your linoleic acid goes up. Where on a low carb, in particular a carnivorous type diet, your arachidonic acid goes up. Why? Because you're consuming your omega-3s from animal sources. So you don't need to do the conversion. So less conversion, less of a problem. You can convert more efficiently the omega-6s to arachidonic acid, which is safer. Voila, problem solved. No ratios required to be dealt with. That pathway is dealing with the omega-6s, and you're eating the omega-3s and don't need to convert them. So let's get this out of our heads. If you're really fucking concerned about omega-3s, eat fucking bacon and stop bitching that you're not getting enough. Simple as that. Eat your fucking bacon. So let's see what equivalent it is to the other. So 100 grams of bacon, which is 3.5 ounces for those non-metric people in North America. So 189. And we need to convert that in relation to, hold on, let me just do this properly. So 6 plus 3.8. So that's the amount divided by 100. Okay. And 189 divided by. So we're looking at 1.9. So 1,928 milligrams, which is basically, divide that by 1,000, we've got 1.92, which is basically just that bacon will get you over the ALA RDIs. Okay, so remember, 2 little stars here. And we're talking about the most optimistic. That means without very high PUFA, we're talking about the most efficient levels. There you go. So if you have bacon in the morning, no eggs, no steak later on, no nothing, just the bacon, 100 grams, 3.5 ounces, you've got more than you require in terms of equivalence, of ALA equivalence. So why the fuck are you guys worried out there? What is wrong with you guys? Some of you guys have got issues. That's all I can say. You haven't done the maths. And that's your problems. You haven't done the maths. Look at the stuff. Look at the conversion rates. Look at the, what has happened. It's the other crap that you've been putting in your diet for a very long time. So I hope this has cleared things up. Unless we're inflamed, we're just going to have more arachidonic acid in our bodies. It's also, if you oxidize arachidonic acid, it's not a problem. The body can do that. Why? Why isn't it? Because it's low in deuterium. It's not a problem. And it's not damaged. It's only the seed oils, and this is the problem, the seed oils which are rancid, damaged and all that, they do mitochondrial damage. And most of the research on rats and all that are with seed oils, guys. You just have to look. Those seed oils they're putting in there, which are fucking toxic and are mitochondrial poisons because of the high deuterium. This is why we've been misled. There's a lot of bullshit out there. And omega-6s and omega-3s from animal sources, you don't oxidize omega-3s anyway. It's more for structural material and for a number of other chemical messaging molecules and stuff like that. But primarily, oxidizing PUFA, omega-6 PUFA, is not an issue if it's low deuterium. It's only a problem when you're using high deuterium seed oils. That's when it becomes a problem because your body can't deplete deuterium fast enough. That's the problem. You've overloaded. People nowadays are up to 40% of their calories are coming from these seed oils. And that is putting an undue, together with all the carbohydrates, which are high in deuterium, it's putting an undue, it's exceeding the capacity for the body to deplete. And as a consequence, what happens is too much deuterium remains in the mitochondria doing damage to the electron chain. And as a consequence, the more damage we do to the mitochondria, the more our cells become senescent, the more quicker we age, the worse we get. And that's why we're more damaged, because we did all that for a number of years. Myself, Mary, and many others. That's why Mary couldn't keep up with an old man at 80 years old, because that guy's got less mitochondrial damage. That guy still has more, healthy mitochondria, has much higher mitochondrial density because he hasn't overloaded his cells, his mitochondria, with deuterium, with high deuterium foods for most of his life. That's the difference. And that person will only die of old age once cell division can't go on. So he'll go like that and then bang. We go chronically, and then die with a bag full of medicine on our deathbed. There's a fundamental difference. Now, if you follow me, you'll basically start using some of my biohacks like Physatin and other things to try and eliminate senescent cells and try and fix these things, try and actually get more low deuterium type fats, especially things like that are coming from pork, which is low deuterium, far more lower than actually other meats. Take a look at the longest longevity populations, Okinawans. We start the morning with pork, we finish the day with pork. Sardinians have a pastoral diet with pork as well. My grandfather lived 107. The Icarians, like the old men, as Mary said, eat pork belly for lunch. We need to get this sort of nonsense that the brainwashed nonsense we've been, that's been put in our heads. We need to get it out of our heads. You know, our brainwashed thinking is the problem, not ancestral foods. You know, it's our brainwashed thinking, all this sort of nonsense and all that, because we're confused. We are mixing up fatty acids that come from a plant and confusing and then transferring that knowledge and basically assuming that the same thing is happening in the animal. It's not. Omega-6s, omega-3s are different in an animal for a whole lot of reasons. The deuterium level, how damaged they are, what state they are, how stable they are, completely different compared to the stuff that's coming from plants. And most of our research is based on that crap. And a lot of the naturopath and a lot of low carb and paleo people took that stuff and moved it across and thought that that was valid. It was invalid. And they've just confused and muddied the waters. We know that even people that eat just regular, supermarket meats get better, get healthier, get less inflamed. Their inflammation comes down. Their C-reactive protein comes down. Their health improves. They lose weight. They basically are in much better state. If animal products, even industrial freaking animal products, will improve their health, we're getting confused by people that have got agendas and all that, and people that have misunderstood things and are basically think that the plant-based sort of issues and problems of these fatty acids are equivalent in the animal form. They're not. Let's just make it quite clear. They are not. This is negative, the plant-based. This is not from the animal source. Let's stop confusing the two. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. See yous.